For most people in the Middle East, the borders that surround them feel ancient. They appear permanent, unquestionable, almost natural. But these borders are not old, they are recent. And many of them were drawn not by the people who lived there, but by men sitting in offices thousands of miles away, during a war that was not fought for the region itself. The Sykes-Picot Agreement was not just a map. It was a moment when the future of the Middle East was decided in secret, with little understanding of what already existed on the ground. Before the First World War, much of the Middle East was part of the Ottoman Empire. This empire was weakening, but it still functioned. Authority was layered. Power flowed through local leaders, religious networks, tribes, and cities. Borders were loose. Identity was often tied more to faith, community, and trade than to fixed national lines. The system was imperfect, but it was familiar to those who lived within it. When World War I began, the Ottoman Empire sided against Britain and France. This decision changed everything. The Middle East stopped being a distant region and became a strategic prize. Control of land meant control of routes, resources, and influence. Britain and France did not yet know exactly what they wanted from the region, but they knew that they did not want the other to have it alone. At the same time, Britain was making promises. To Arab leaders, Britain hinted at independence if they helped overthrow Ottoman rule. These promises were vague, but powerful. Arab fighters believed they were helping to create their own future. Britain encouraged this belief because it was useful. War creates urgency, and urgency encourages shortcuts. While these promises were being made publicly, another conversation was happening privately. In 1916, Britain and France negotiated an agreement that divided the Middle East into zones of influence. This was the Sykes-Picot Agreement. It was secret, it was detailed, and it assumed that European powers would decide the region's future regardless of local expectations. The map drawn by Sykes and Picot did not follow history, culture, or economics. It followed strategic logic. Ports were valuable. Rivers mattered. Routes to India mattered. Influence mattered. Communities were secondary. Borders were lines of convenience, not belonging. Under this agreement, France would control large parts of what is now Syria and Lebanon. Britain would control areas that became Iraq, Jordan, and influence over Palestine. The agreement treated land as empty space, even though it was full of people with memories, loyalties, and rivalries. The problem was not just that the map was artificial, it was that it contradicted other promises already made. Arab leaders expected independence. Zionist leaders expected support for a homeland in Palestine. European allies expected fair division. The same land was promised to different groups for different reasons, all during the same war. When the war ended and the Ottoman Empire collapsed, the secret agreement became reality. Britain and France did not call their control colonization, they called it mandates. The language suggested temporary guidance, not ownership, but in practice it was empire by another name. Local populations quickly realized that independence was not coming. Instead of self-rule, they received foreign administrators. Decisions were made in London and Paris. Borders hardened. Resistance grew. Rebellions were suppressed. Stability was enforced, not earned. In Iraq, Britain merged regions with different histories, sects, and expectations into a single state. It installed a monarchy to manage tensions, believing centralized authority would hold the system together. It worked briefly, but unity built without shared identity is fragile. In Syria, France divided the land further, separating communities to weaken resistance. This fragmentation created resentment that never fully disappeared. Lebanon was shaped to protect certain groups while marginalizing others, embedding imbalance into the state itself. Palestine became the most complicated case. Conflicting promises collided there most directly. British administration struggled to balance incompatible expectations. Tensions grew steadily. Violence followed. The map could not resolve what the agreement had created. The deeper issue was not incompetence, it was design. Sykes-Picot assumed that order could be imposed from above and that people would adapt. But people do not forget promises made to them. They do not forget borders imposed without consent. Memory lasts longer than maps. As decades passed, these borders became international facts. Independence movements inherited them rather than redrawing them, because changing borders risks chaos. The result was states that looked stable on paper but carried unresolved contradictions within. Sykes-Picot did not cause every conflict in the Middle East, but it created a framework where conflict became more likely. It replaced flexible systems with rigid lines. It turned political disagreements into territorial disputes. It transformed local tensions into permanent national crises. Also, the agreement taught a lesson about power. Financial, military, and political systems allow distant actors to shape regions they do not fully understand. Decisions made quietly can echo for generations. The absence of voices in the room does not erase their presence on the land. Today, when the Middle East experiences instability, the map is often blamed. But the map is only a symptom. The deeper wound is the broken trust created when promises are made without intention to keep them. Sykes-Picot did not just draw borders, it broke expectations, and broken expectations harden into grievances that outlive empires. The agreement was meant to bring order after war. Instead, it ensured that the war's consequences would never fully end. That is why Sykes-Picot still matters, not because of the lines themselves, but because of how they were drawn, why they were drawn, and who was never asked. Maps can end wars, or they can begin long ones. And in the Middle East, the map drawn in secret a century ago is still being lived with today.